Hello everybody and welcome back to another Kings of War battle report. I'm Visibly Riley, and today we have Empire of Dust versus Dwarves. This battle was fought at 2250 points, and the scenario was loot. So first off, we see before we get into my opponent's army, I mentioned last week that I lost a battle report due to some technical issues, and this is actually the same army from that time. My opponent graciously agreed to a rematch this week, and here we are. So first off, we have Hernius' hunting party, the formation, which involves Hernius the Hunter and 2 regiments of Rangers. In that formation, both those regiments of Rangers just become Hernius' Rangers, so they gain elite and stealthy. Then we have the Wall of Iron formation, which involves a horde of bulwarkers, 2 regiments of Ironclad, and a king. This one has the Wings of Honeymaze. Then we have a regiment of Mastiff Hunting Pack, a regiment of Brock Riders with the Caterpillar Potion, a mounted Berserker Lord with Blade of the Beast Slayer, a Flame Priest with Bane Chant 2 and Guiding Light 2, Gallic's Fury, and 2 Organ Guns. Sorry about that. As for my thoughts on the list itself, I think it's really good. It's pretty close to what I would run were I to run Dwarves, and in fact, I think I helped my opponent craft this one, or at least a proto version of it. This is a little different from, I think, what I talked to him about running. But yeah, I really like it. I think it's really good. The only change I would make is that I don't like Guiding Light in Dwarves. And mostly that's, I mean, Guiding Light Organ Guns is amazing. I'm not going to argue that. But the problem I see is that the Flame Priest and so all their wizards are speed 4, they don't have mounting options, and Guiding Light is only range 12, meaning that it could just, it could just be going off when you don't need it. It could be going off when combat has already been met, so your line of sight's blocked with the organ guns. There are just too many ifs. So I'd probably drop that Guiding Light, but the rest of the army I think is great. I love Wall of Iron. I think that's one of the best formations in the game. King with Wings of Honeymaze I think is one of the only Def 6 individual flyers that is left in the game, if not the only one. So obviously even better with Iron Resolve there. And yeah, I can't say enough, so I just won't say anything. Great list. Moving on to my Empire of Dust list. First off, we have the Mummy's Revenge formation, which involves a Cursed High Priest. I gave mine Heal 4 and Shroud of the Saint, then 2 regiments of Mummies. In this formation, both the Mummies gain Elite and Vicious. Then I have a horde of Skeleton Archers with the Fire Oil, a horde of Skeleton Warriors with Banner the Griffin, a horde of Enslaved Guardians with Brew of Haste and Weakness 2, 2 regiments of Revenant Chariots, Apophis with Wings, Mortibris, a Bone Giant, and the Soul Snare. So this is a bit of a weirder army. Part of it is because back in the Warhammer days, I had painted up some skeleton art. Well, to make a long story short, the Tomb King's army, or the models that I have, were given to me by another person, so they were already painted. So I've been slow in the process of just sort of renovating those paint jobs instead of stripping them and redoing them. I just make them more my own. So it's been an interesting idea. And the first thing I did that with were the skeleton archers that he had painted. So I have 30 painted archers, or 40, something like that. So yeah, I really wanted to get them back in the army. I don't think skeleton archers are particularly good in Empire of Dust, but at least the horde, I think regiments are pretty good, troops are pretty good, but the horde not so much. But still, I brought it. I thought it'd be fun. The rest of the army, yeah, again, it's based off of the models I have in what is already painted. So I have 2 regiments of chariots basically done. I only have 7 Ushabti for the Enslaved Guardians, so 1 horde of those is a pretty good plan. I have the Skeleton Warriors, I have the Archers, I have the Mummies, I have all these things. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to do. It's definitely not the best version of the list, but it is interesting. The new Apophis is obviously really good. I played him a few times back when they introduced him in 2018, but given that he has heavy flyer, he had heavy flyer, it just wasn't all that great. So anyway, this is the new plan, so we'll see how it goes. Here we see the table. So before we go into the terrain, let's talk about the scenario. So in loot, you have 3 loot tokens. So we've got 1, 2, and 3. And before the game begins, you set up one loot token in the exact center of the table, and then each player takes turns placing one loot counter on the center line. Actually, interestingly, with the way it's written, because they decided to have the line about placing these on the center line, I mean, you could argue that it doesn't actually say put them on the center line when you deploy them. It just says put them down on the center line, then later talks about deploying them. So it's not the most unclear. The intent is very clear, but could probably use a bit of sprucing there. But anyway, the way that the scenario is played mostly is that you place all 3 loot counters on the center line. So the first one's in the dead center, and then each player takes turns placing one loot counter, more than 12 inches away from each other and more than 3 inches away from impassable terrain. So I believe I placed this one on the right because it was right behind this forest. So either, if I ended up on this side of the table or on this side of the table, it would be behind the forest, although this might have been after we chose sides. I can't remember. And then my opponent placed the other one in the forest for the inverse property, which is no matter which side of the table you're coming from, no matter what, he can shoot into the woods here. So, yep, that's the plan there. Then let's talk about what the terrain is. So on the far right, we have our first, I think this was a height 4 impassable piece. Down here, we have a height 1 obstacle. Over here, we have a height 2 hill, right in front of my deployment zone. Then over here, we have a height 1 difficult piece, so that is a graveyard. Up here, we've got a height 6 forest. Over here, we have a height 2 hill. Right over here, we've got another height 1 obstacle. I think actually attached to a height 1 difficult, another graveyard. Down here, we've got another height 6 forest, and finally another height 2 hill. So pretty standard terrain layout. The kill zone's in the middle of the table this time, with the both the flanks sort of being locked off. These forests, and they're not particularly big, but they are of medium size, medium girth. So they will stop a lot of units in terms of not getting hindered going through them. And then these hills are blocking some of the line of sight, right? Blocking the line of sight up from deployment zones. So if you move out, you'll be in the clear, and then you can shoot, down these gaps as well. But the main funnel is right there in the middle. So let's go into deployment. So deployment for the Dwarves. This week, my opponent, man, we started this game late, so I just didn't want to get his dogs out. So instead, we have an empty base. That's the Mastiff Regiment, regiment. Behind them, the beginning of the Berserker Baroque Riders. I actually really like the idea of some like lizard riding, some more like jungly dwarves. I think that'd be a really cool modeling project. But yep, so we've got the Baroque Riders right there. Next to them is the Berserker Lord. Then next to that, we have both of the Rangers, which are represented by skinks. I know my opponent has enough crossbowmen for this, or crossbow dwarves, so it's a little weird that he's using the skinks, but whatever. Behind them, one of those crossbowmen is representing Hernius. And then to the left of that, we have the 1st Regiment of Ironclad with both of the organ guns right here in the middle. Actually, let's go back a picture. This guy right here, this little rune priest looking motherfucker, that is his flame priest today. And then in front of him, that is the Horde of Bulwarkers with a great arrow pointing to them. Horde of Bulwarkers. This guy right here, this Dwarven Engineer, that is his king, which is funny because this is actually a Dwarven king model that I painted for him way back when. But it's attached to these robots, so it doesn't really work. But anyway, that is the king back there. Then the big dinosaur, that is Gallic. Gallic's Fury again, not actually Gallic. Next to Gallic's Fury, we've got the Ironclad, the 2nd Regiment of them. And I think that's actually, that's the final picture there. Then we go into the Empire of Dust. We've got both the regiments of chariots right here, and in between them, the Soul Snare, that is this Gatorman, undead Gatorman model. Then we've got the Bone Giant right there, riding behind the chariots. Then we have the horde of archers right here with the cursed high priest right behind them. We have Morgana right here, right behind Apophis. Then finally on my left flank, we have the horde of skeleton warriors with the enslaved guardians behind them, and then both the regiments of mummies. So before I go into turn one, yeah, I did definitely misdeploy. I was just talking to the table next to us, and we were, shooting the shit. It was, like I said, it was a bit of a later start this time, so yeah, I didn't really think about where I wanted things until I was already putting models down. So I know, for example, these mummies are not inspired right now. That's a big mistake. I have Apophis and Morgana right here. Really, I just want to make sure that Morty is hitting Apophis with stealthy, but otherwise I want Morgana to be probably somewhere around here, right, between these mummies and the enslaved guardians, or have Apophis be put down, and then these units be put down around him to close this, these gaps to his side. But anyway, I digress, and moving on to turn one. So turn one, the Empire of Dust wins the roll-off. You can see the Rangers here have vanguarded forward, and because of that, I win the roll, and my chariots are in charge range of both the regiments of Rangers. So at least Hernius is not part of it. Hernius is hiding, cowering in fear behind them, but still, I decide the way that Empire of Dust chariots are really, really good as either so they're really good jamming units or tar pit units. The difference between the two, in case you're wondering, a tar pit unit is a tar pit strategy is what I'm doing now, which is holding around the center line, right? It's a unit that goes into you, and then when you countercharge into it, it's unlikely to die. So like bulwarkers are a good tar pit, right? But a unit like gargoyles, who are really fast, very nimble, right, can get deep into your opponent's line, that's a jamming unit, because what that's going to do is get stuck in front of your opponent's army. It's immediately going to die, but it's going to stop them from being able to advance towards the field. They both do similar things, but they're not exactly the same sort of unit. So anyway, I digress. Both my chariots charge into one of the ranger regiments. The idea here is that when I charge into both these, I'm not in range of getting countercharged by either of these dwarves. I'll be out of 8. And these rangers are going to be stuck behind my chariots anyway. And if I had charged one chariot and then one chariot here, not only am I very unlikely to actually do anything, besides maybe turn off their shooting, I also have no targets for the soul snare if I do that. So instead, they both go into this unit of rangers, and when they slide down, the soul snare can just advance forward and can catch this little bit of a sliver of the rangers right there. So that's the charges. Then the rest of the army, on the left flank, we just advance forward. It gets a little, again, like I said, it gets a little messy because of how poorly this was deployed. We're kind of stuck behind each other. And if you're wondering where the back half of these mummies, well, maybe you'll find out in the coming weeks. But anyway, then Morgana moves to a better position. This time I'm inspiring out to these mummies, and also not popping out to get punked by organ guns. The skeleton archers do not move forward, and the idea here is that the giant moves up, then the archers will just bump into him when I cast Surge with this cursed high priest. Apophis just about faces and runs off behind the chariots, just to be a little bit more annoying. It might be a mistake with all these Brock Riders over here, his natural enemy, but still, it'll make it so the Brock Riders can't just loop around my line, right? Because oh, that was weird. So right now, the Brock Riders could just loop around and then really get into me, but with Apophis here, they at least have a target, right? So I'm forcing them to come at me. Apophis is pretty difficult to take down now that he's dash 21, and I've got plenty of heal around, so maybe it's fine. As for, here's the end of, I think this is actually the end of shooting. So yeah, you can see I surged my skeletons forward. They take aim and fire at this organ gun. They did 1 wound to it. Not anything too special, but it's fine. The soul snare continues to be excellent. Does 6 wounds to this unit. of rangers, and all I need is a 7 to get that waiver now, which is pretty hot because Apophis is right there to give dread out, but unfortunately I don't roll it. Then against these rangers, it turns out I did need both the units of chariots because I only do 4 wounds, and it's all from one unit. This unit, the left one, which is what would have gone into them solo, just doesn't hit at all. So I mean, they are 5s and 3s with 8 attacks, so you know, they're not the best units right now in the woods, but still, getting the 4 wounds is absolutely fine though, because all I'm really looking for is a few wounds to disorder them. So that is the Empire of Dust, and moving on to, well, here's a little bit of an action shot. Then we go on to Dwarf turn 1. So Dwarf turn 1, it's definitely a cool one. My opponent takes a hot minute to decide what to do, and it's because he sees a charge here that I didn't, which is if these rangers countercharge into my chariots here, they will slide down, right, to center. Then these rangers can charge in, or can combo charge with these Brock Riders. So I was thinking the Brock Riders were going to be out of range, but it turns out they're pretty easily within, well, not like super easily, but within that 1-inch margin of my far corner here. So while I was thinking from my leader point, right, which is right about there, his leader point, or their leader point, is actually just going into this corner. So by doing this little truffle shuffle, ends up getting a nice little combo charge with the Brock Riders and the Rangers into these chariots. So, I mean, the chariots are almost certainly dead. These Brock Riders have caterpillars, so ew. My opponent then does some pretty good positioning with his Brock Rider Lord, and then the Hounds, because Apophis is in the flank of the Hounds, who also needed to get out of the way, so the Brocks could charge. So he's in their flank, and then I'm in the flank of this individual too, meaning that by placing it right here and it's butted up against the side of the Brock Riders, I can't charge into his Brock Lord because I can't fit, and then the Brock Lord is also blocking off the dogs. So pretty good move. You know, that one I actually did see coming, and in fact helped my opponent navigate it a little bit, because he's definitely newer to Kings of War. So just talking about, like, not what should you do, or, oh, I mean, sometimes it is, but not in this case. He came up with a plan. It's just how do you execute it, right? So yeah, pretty cool there. Otherwise, the dwarves just advance forward a little bit more cautiously than I probably would. My opponent is a little wary of surge shenanigans. Like I said, has not played against a lot of Empire Dust or Undead or just Kings of War in general. So surge is definitely one of those things that if it bites you once, you get a little gun shy. So yeah, he holds back a little bit. Over here with this forest, my opponent takes 1 unit and puts it directly behind the woods, which I actually really like that move, because they are now out of line of sight, and my mummies, when they move, this is a greater than 5-inch movement. So yeah, I can't actually touch the forest to get that. Well, I guess I could just surge blind into them, but still, I'm not close enough to get a good surge there. Now the king decides to fly also behind the woods, and I think this is a little overly cautious. I do like the king being on this side of the field, or really that third of the field, but I probably would have put the king somewhere around here. That way there's still some clear line of sights off there, while this forest is protecting them against, say, some of this skeletons and stuff like that. But even then, I mean, none of these models have Pathfinder. Only the Enslaved Guardians have really a good chance of killing a king in one go while hindered. So I don't know. I probably would have put the king over here, but small miscalculation, or maybe my opponent saw something I don't. But yeah, the rest of the army just advances forward just a little bit. Again, I'd probably have pushed hard. Bulwarkers are pretty difficult for Empire of Dust to, well, at least my version, this list right here, to dislodge, given that I'm not running, like 3 giants or a bunch of bone dragons or anything. And Apophis, one of my big hitters, is actually facing the wrong way to fight them. So moving forward, so here is the end of combat with my opponent shooting both the organ guns. I think fire into I think they fire into my skeletons and do like a wound. It's not that deadly, but in combat things are a little different. The Rangers and the Brock Riders easily murder my skeletons or my chariots, while the other chariots actually end up taking 6 wounds from these countercharging Rangers. So that's not, that's not super crazy, because the Rangers have 12 attacks on 4s with elite and then crush 1, so 12 attacks on 4s with reroll 1s and then 3s to wound. Still significantly above average, so 6 wounds is a little unsightly, but still I think things are looking pretty nice at the end of the turn. You can see this loot counter still here, and that's because my chariots refused to pick it up last turn. So as far as I understand, it is a can, as is worded by the 2019 rulebook, so I just chose to leave it. And we move on to turn 2. So turn 2 for the Empire of Dust. Things are getting a little bit a little bit bloodier, but what happens here, my opponent didn't really foresee this giant charging a full 14 inches, so not even getting the weird surge shenanigans, just a flat you are within 14 inches of me. So I do a combo charge with him and the chariots, or it in the chariots, given that I could see over him. So that's the only big charge. In fact, I think it's the only charge going on. I slide down a little bit. I do need to make sure these Rangers die, specifically these ones, although these ones would also be nice, because right now I think the giant, if it bounces back an inch, it'll be in line of sight of these Brock Riders. They'll have flank charge on me. That's not what you want to see. No es bueno. So yeah, hoping to deal with that. On the left side of the field, I just advance forward a little bit. So these mummies are also sitting slightly out of the woods, because right now the dwarves, given that they're not running any surge, they have no charges, because again, this king is a little too far to the left. Really should be somewhere around here, so can't really threaten me. And of course, the bulwarkers are just waiting on this loot token. So, yep, we just move forward and go, we can play that game as well, and we're quite a bit tougher. And that's what we do. And you can see I've taken 1 wound here. I think that's... So the organ guns must have shot at the enslaved guardians and not at the skeletons. Or this wound is just in the wrong spot. Anyway, moving forward, this is the end of combat, but what you missed here is the shooting. If we roll a picture back, the Soul Snare plus Apophis both go for the Drain Life on these this unit right here. It turns out to be unnecessary to use Apophis, because the Soul Snare alone does 5 wounds to them, and then heals the chariots for 5, and then they do at least 1 wound in combat, so they're at full health. I roll pretty spectacularly on that break check, so they're gone, and the giant decides, so this unit gets killed by the Soul Snare, and then this unit of Rangers gets killed by the giant and the chariots. The giant decides to overrun, just the 1 inch away from Hernias here, and then to threaten organ guns because they're kind of stuck there, threaten these guys if they choose to stay. The chariots decide to just stay put because of where I put Apophis, because I wanted to get a Drain Life going, and I guess Dread as well. But he's directly like corner to corner touching these guys, so they don't have a lot of wiggle room, and they're currently out of 8-inch charge of this unit that you can barely see, the bulwarkers. So not a big reason to move anymore, and I also don't want to give the Ironclad a flank charge. That would be bad, or even worse, a rear charge. They are out of line of sight of the what are these, Brock Riders, and that's why why Apophis is here. Part of it is to get the Drain Life going here, but also because he's just out of their line of sight. Like, that's a terrible line, but you get the idea. Just out of their line of sight. In fact, I have the friggin' thing right there. But yeah, Apophis is just perfect. And moving forward to the end of... that's what it looks like at the end of the turn. Moving into Dwarf turn 2. You can see on the left, again, we just continue playing peekaboo. Neither of us willing to move forward. The bulwarkers finally inch forward towards the skeleton warriors. Again, I don't understand holding them back. In this case I do, because I've got, well, no, because the Ironclad charged me. Yeah, I don't really get it. I don't have a lot of flank opportunities besides these mummies who would be hindered, and you could just move forward and, you know, pivot a little bit, right? Because I don't even think they move their full 4. But anyway, I think they should have marched last turn. Here is fine. So they move forward a little bit. Playing peekaboo, Gallic decides to turn a little bit so they can see Apophis, or maybe the skeleton warriors or the archers, whatever floats their boat. Both the organ guns. Oh, you can see this gold die. That is from my enslaved guardians slapping a weakness onto the organ gun this turn. I actually got a weakness turn 1 onto Gallic, but just not that important. So, yep, onto the right side of the field, you can see just barely these bulwarkers charge into my chariots. That's a pretty good charge. The bulwarkers are hindered, but who cares? They're just bulwarkers anyway. 12 attacks on 5s, doing 1 wound makes it so the chariots don't really have a lot of hitting power against the bulwarkers. The only real problem with it is that this giant can see their flank if they don't manage to kill me. So I guess there's that, but that giant was probably going to see it regardless. I don't think there was a way to move, and taking a giant and the chariot's not the best. But we do get the Brock Rider Lord, or the Berserker Lord, getting into Apophis, which begins the grounding of my my flyer. The dogs move forward a little bit because they were right here, or somewhere around here. And so when they pivot and move 6, they just barely miss the token, which sucks for them. It would be really nice to have that token for them. The Brock Riders are easily within charge range of my Soul Snare, and just move into it. Before, the picture might have looked like the Soul Snare was behind the barrier. It's actually just in front of it. It's just part of the base is on this barrier, so it's getting a little messy. But yeah, they have an easy charge there. I'm pretty sure we just double one it because that's like 78 attacks or some crazy amount. And that's about it. So let's go into what happens. So here's an action shot of the end of the round. I believe with all my opponents shooting, it goes into Apophis. Yeah, both the organ guns and Gallic go into... No, they don't go into Apophis. They go into my giant. That's the plan, yeah. So the organ guns and the Gallic shoot my giant, end up doing 8 wounds to them, which is pretty good considering it's cover, and cover, one of them has weakness, and I think Gallic moved. So not the best odds, but still producing that damage. The Berserker Lord only manages 3 damage on Apophis, which is pretty poor, but still, all you're really looking for is 1 to make sure I can't cast or run away. The Berserker Brock Riders do not double one this this charge into my Soul Snare, easily kill it off and turn to face. Now, part of the reason why I moved the Soul Snare here is because, 1, I really wanted it to contribute more to the game, but you gotta do what you gotta do. So these Brock Riders are now stuck on the fence. They're really on the fence about these flank charges, but really, the point is that they have Pathfinder, but not Strider. So now I've made it so no matter where they charge, unless it's a counter charge, they are going to be hindered, which means they lose their Thunderous Charge 1, and they're going to be on 5s. So it really blunts their effectiveness. But yeah, that's about it. Oh, you can see the Bulwarkers went into my chariots. Thankfully, they did a wound. I think they actually did 2. So, because they only hit with 2 attacks, but they sink them both. So at least there's that. And we move on to yeah, this is the end of the round. You can see things are looking, they're all right. I think in my last turn, the Skeleton Archers, I forgot to mention, yeah, they shoot at the Flame Priest looking for an easy, or it's not easy, but it's 6s to hit. They're not that effective against Dwarves. So they go into them, they do 1 wound to the Flame Priest and don't manage to shake it. So yeah, we've got 1 wound here and 1 wound here. I'm getting them. I'm gonna get all my opponents' wound dice out, and thus, he'll be immune to wounds later. Moving on to turn 3. So turn 3, you can see Empire Tusk is getting a little bit more aggressive now. If the dwarves won't charge me, by gum, we'll charge them. So my mummies just move forward a little bit. Oh no, hold on, let's go back a picture. I think on my opponent's turn, the king now is touching the forest to be seen. So, so I take the mummies here and charge into the Dwarven King, picking up the loot token on the way. I take my skeleton warriors and I think they just charge the bulwarkers. I don't think they need to be surged. So yeah, if they won't charge me, I'll charge them. And then I end up, things are getting a little weirder. I have these mummies just moving forward. I could surge them down this gap on a long surge into the ironclad there, but I probably won't. I have my enslaved guardians ready to back up my skeletons. Really, all they're looking to get is a weakness onto the bulwarkers. Because Gallic's gonna do what Gallic's gonna do. So dude has 25 plus d6 attacks, but they only hit on 5s and they're crush 3 anyway, so who cares? It's a swing unit, right? It has a very high roof, but it's not likely to do too much damage. The bulwarkers, on the other hand, have 30 attacks, right? But my opponent didn't give them Brew of Strength, so they're just going to be wounding me on 4s, with assuming that they don't get Banechant off. But yeah, so if I get weakness onto them, 4s and 5s, I might be able to actually weather that storm. So that's what we go for. My skeleton archers just about face to block off the Brock Riders. Granted, they don't block them too much. Brock Riders have a easy rear there. Probably, I think they can no, they can't currently charge Apophis because they are in Apophis's flank, and the chariots are in the way. So they've got an easy rear here, but they could charge into the chariots as well, or into into the archers as well if they so please. So yeah, the archers just turn to loose some bow shots real quick. I also had this idea that maybe the archers might charge, but when I get hindered, I've got 10 attacks on 6s, 10 attack on 6s and 4s. Well, I don't even think I'm going to turn off their Thunderous. I think I'm just going to turn it into a countercharge so they're not -1, so I don't go for that in the end. The priest doesn't have a whole lot to do. Looks like I'm going to cast heal onto one of these 2 units. Apophis gets onto the hill because I want to be able to have the choice of casting Surge onto the mummies if I want, or maybe going for a deep lightning bolt or Banechant. It all depends. So that's the plan. Apophis sees the Berserker Lord and goes, I just don't want to deal with that. So Apophis and the chariots both charge into the bulwarkers, hoping to kill them off, because if I get that kill, Apophis can overrun and run off and hide. The bulwarkers won't be able to charge me anyway, nor will Gallic, because this whole mess will be in the way. And the chariots can just tank like champs. The giant decides to charge into an organ gun, looking to just, limit my opponent's firepower, especially as they still have Guiding Light. Oh no, that's right, last turn I forgot to mention. That's the Guiding Light turn, so my opponent gets a Guiding Light onto my giant, which is how I took the 8 wounds. That makes a lot more sense now. Sorry about that. So yeah, Guiding Light is gone, but popping an organ gun when you're closing in with your skeletons, probably a good idea. And here's the first double one of the game. Yep, I double won these bulwarkers, and it is super unfortunate because I did 3 wounds. I mean, they should be dead. But yeah, get a superfluous double one there, and we move forward onto the freaking ironclad. So I do 6 wounds to the ironclad, right? Which isn't all that great. Apophis is not hindered, and the chariots have a countercharge, so that's 8 attacks on 4s and 5s, and then 12 attacks on 4s and 2s with elite. So I was hoping for a few more wounds than 6, but I do get that. Thankfully, I get a waiver here, so the 6 wounds stick. Iron Resolve does not fire, so at least there's that. You can see my wounds have gone down a little bit. The chariots only went down due to Life Leech. Apophis, I do cast heal on him. He had 3 wounds before. I only healed 1 of them, so good job, everybody. And here's what the end of the turn looks like. You can see on the left, the mummies that charged into the king. They did end up, I don't remember how many. It looks like they did 4 wounds to the king right there, and they get a lucky waiver, which is pretty cool. I mean, granted, dwarves are headstrong, so waivers are meh, but still getting that done. pretty good. And then the giant manages just barely to kill off that war machine with its treble attacks, and then overruns. So I decided to overrun because I was currently in the line of sight of this organ gun, and I went like, well, I don't really want to get shot, so I'll just roll it, right? If I get a, as long as I get like a 2 to 4, that'd be pretty good. A 2 would be great. A 3 is pretty good. A 4 is okay. Of course, I roll a 6, and I just jet off towards my opponent's, board edge at this point. Not even deployment zone. So, goodbye, giant. Just run off. Do whatever. And we move on to turn 3 for the dwarves. So, turn 3 for the dwarves. You can see the king and now the ironclad join the battle against the mummies. Maybe the king failed headstrong? Because this is not aligned correctly. Or maybe we just haven't aligned it yet. But anyway, they go in there. Gallic and the bulwarkers go into the skeleton warriors. I did forget to mention I failed to successfully cast weakness this turn, or last turn, so these are full strength bulwarkers. Not the best for the old Empire Dust. The Brock Riders take this easy rear charge into my chariots. Seems fair, while this the Berserker Lord had the same problem as the Brock Riders in that he was technically in Apophis's flank, so because he can't get to it, has to choose a different target, chooses to go into one of my priests. Could have gone into Mortibris, but Mortibris is actually a 15-17, so while you shut down more spells that way, you're pretty unlikely to kill anything, while if you go into this priest, right, that's the Cursed High Priest, Berserker Brock Lord has, I think, 8 attacks on 3s and then on 2s against this guy. So yeah, 3s and 2s with Vicious, and I'm a dash 13, so not the most unlikely kill there. Seems like a good idea. Oh, you can see, yeah, my archers managed 2 wounds on these dogs and did waver them. And since the dogs don't have headstrong, all they can do is pivot onto the loot token, and I do believe that even while wavered, you can pick up loot tokens in loot. It's in scavenge, I think you can't, because you have to get them out of the control points. But anyway, Hernius just moves around a little bit to get some shots off on my giant, while the organ gun, I think, plans to shoot probably Mortibris right now. I think that's the only target. No, you could shoot into the enslaved guardians, which would be a bad idea. Again, ignoring loot tokens. But yeah, so that's it for the movement. In the shooting phase, my opponent does take Hernius plus this breath attack and goes into my giant, dealing 2 or 3 wounds. I want to say. I think I get up to 9 wounds. So looking for a 10 twice to kill me, or no, 10 once. I think I'm actually out of range of Apophis as well. His very inspiring. So yeah, fails that roll, and the giant lives to tell the tale. With the organ gun, fires a couple shots into Mortibris. I think they do 1 or 2 wounds there, but that's about it. And we move on to combat. So here's the end of combat. You can see the bulwarkers, who are down to 2 wounds because I rolled a double 1. How unlucky is that? But the bulwarkers plus Gallic easily kill off these skeleton warriors. And it was pretty funny because I was like, man, that weakness would have been great because Gallic rolls, doesn't roll that high, right? I know, I think Gallic does like 6 or 7 wounds to me. And then the bulwarkers do like 5 wounds. No, they do like 7 wounds. But if I'd had weakness, they would have been down to like 5 wounds, I want to say. And I was like, man, that would have been... And then my opponent just like 11 into boxcars, or 11-11 me. So whatever. They were dead. They were destined to die. So pretty funny there. My opponent decides to not reform with these, mostly because there's nothing to really do. Apophis is stuck because these ironclad who passed their headstrong charged into him, turned off his flight. And again, I'm in the flank, so I can't charge here. So there's no reason to really move. All that would make it is so my enslaved guardians could maybe get some weird, surge shenanigans. Like if Gallic overran a little bit, I could go forward, put my leader point through a pivot into their flank, and then get a flank charge. So yeah, no reason to go forward just yet. As for what happens in the on the flanks here, on the left, you can see the mummies take 5 wounds. So that's unfortunate, but that's a 13 to actually get them, so nothing happens. Yeah, I don't think... No, here, yeah, you can see that this is now correctly placed. The king did pass their headstrong because, yeah, everything slid down a little bit more. And then on the far right, you can see, yeah, the chariots are gone. The Brock Riders killed them off. And then the Berserker Brock Lord, poor Berserker Brock Lord, just rolling terribly on his hits. So ends up doing 4 wounds to this Cursed High Priest and cannot roll the 9 to kill it. So it remains, and we move on to turn 4. So turn 4 for the Empire of Dust. You know, things continue. They continue as they do. Apophis finally charges a unit that charged him before. I just been bouncing around to everything the whole game, so pretty fun there. Go into the wounded Ironclad. If I can do well there, obviously I don't want Apophis to get rear charged or flank charged by these Brock Riders, and the only thing I could really see to do, since I can't fly, I can't fit through here, I'm not nimble, so I can't run that way, or just run off 20 that way. So instead I just take this charge, hoping to kill them off. The Skeleton Archers, I don't think I adjust them right now, but maybe I do in the end. I don't know. No, I don't think I do, because they're planning to just shoot into those dogs, hoping to finish them off. I do move the Cursed High Priest in the way of the Brock Riders. So if Apophis kills off these Ironclad, I will be able to overrun, hopefully out of the 6 inches from the edge here. I'm like 2 inches right now, so, you know, need to kill this thing, and then on the adjust, I think it becomes like a 2 or 3 to get to me, so hopefully I just kill that off. In the bottom left, on the left flank, you can see the mummies have gone back into the Dwarf King, hoping to finish him off and then overrun into the Ironclad. That'd be great. You can also see I'm still at 5 wounds. That is because I forgot mummies had a regen this game until the very end, so that was kind of funny. This shot is at like almost 2 in the morning though. So anyway, I take these mummies, go into Gallic. So I'm not sure that was the best idea, especially as I was thinking mummies don't have regen, but yeah, I don't know. I decided in the end I wanted to turn off his shooting, but I'm not so sure about that. I take the Enslaved Guardians and move forward a little bit. I originally go like, oh look, a loot token, so I can pivot like this, I can cast Weakness, grab the loot token, then oh wait, I can't surge. So I just leave that loot token again. My plan is to cast Weakness onto the Bulwarkers and then charge into them with a surge from Mortibus. So yeah, that's the go. The giant just, yeah, you can see the giant's down to 8 wounds right now because of that dead organ gun. Just turns around to face the other one, hoping to just wipe it all out. And moving on to what happens. Oh, let's talk about the shooting. Yeah, these archers do pretty well onto the dogs, wiping them off. I think I do get weakness off onto the bulwarkers, but I'm not exactly sure. I might have... Yeah, that's probably better than going for a Wind Blast. So yeah, I get the weakness off onto the Bulwarkers, and Mortibus does succeed at getting this 1 or 2 inch surge onto the Enslaved Guardians to get that going. So moving forward onto combat, you can see here, Apophis does manage to kill off the Ironclad, so that is big news for the Empire of Dust. I overrun, I think he also overruns 6, so just chasing down this giant, they're high-fiving, just, you know, bros for life, facing down, ready to Eiffel Tower this poor organ gun. You can see so the Enslaved Guardians do terribly. That is 4 wounds. I'm not sure if that's before or after Iron Resolve, but even then that would be 5 wounds, right? They've got 18 attacks on 3s and, well, 3s and 4s, I guess. It's not that bad. I take it back. So yeah, I do a couple wounds with the Enslaved Guardians. Not too great, but you know, you get what you get. And here is what the end of the turn looks like. You can see, yes, the mummies do manage to kill the Dwarf King, so that's really good news. The Dwarf King being dead and the Ironclad being dead, those are big. So killed off that Dwarf King, overrun into these Ironclad, don't manage to kill them off, but I do waver them. So just wavering a lot of Dwarf units here. All right. Golic, I only managed 3 wounds on, which is pretty bad. Let's see there. 12 attacks on 4s and 4s, right? You'd think 3 wounds, but I also do have Elite and Vicious, so it's a little below average there. But still, I don't roll the boxcar I need to waver him. Actually, if I remember correctly, my opponent thought he was fearless, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize Golic was fearless. That's ridiculous. But yeah, a boxcar probably not the most likely. That 1 in 36. So I back off here because, as I said before, I don't do enough wounds to get a kill, unsurprisingly. And that's about it. So moving on to turn 4 for the Dwarves. Well, nope, just another. Okay, weird. Okay. Yeah, so turn 4 for the Dwarves. You can see this is sort of an end of turn shot. It looks like I forgot to, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot to take a picture, the before picture for the Dwarves. So let's roll it back again. So the Berserker Brock Riders charge into my Cursed High Priest. That's not that
surprising.
I think the Brock Lord goes back into Apophis. Then we've got the Bulwarkers into the Enslaved Guardians, Golic into the Mummies. The Ironclad, I think, fail Headstrong this turn, so they don't charge anything. And yeah, then we've got Hernius and his buddy, the Flame Priest, hoping to finally kill off this stupid Bone Giant. And here's the action shot. So the Bone Giant, you can see up to 9 wounds. I've taken 1 more wound. From my opponent's shooting, but not enough to take me down. Apophis takes a few more wounds from this Berserker Lord. Again, not rolling too well, but yeah, not enough to get a roll yet. The Brock Riders, thankfully, also didn't make this. That would also be real bad. They'd got that flank charge, but I had to protect Apophis, I think. So, yeah. My opponent, the Bulwarkers with weakness on them, only managed 3 wounds. I think that's actually pretty good because they're 4s. They're on 4s and 6s to wound me. So with 30 attacks, no 3. Yeah. 3 wounds is a little. It's not that far above average. In fact, I would say it's about average. So yeah, that's about that. And here is the end of turn shot. Yeah, you can see on the left here, these these Ironclad did in fact fail their Headstrong, so cannot countercharge against the Mummies. Golic ends up doing 9 wounds to me, so that's pretty good. And that's about it. And we move on to turn 5. So turn 5. So Apophis is still like, I am not gonna fight this friggin' Berserker Lord. There's no reason to. So I charge in. I go for a hindered charge onto this Flame Priest rather than fight this friggin' Berserker Lord. And I mostly do that because I thought it would be funny to just never fight him, right? Like just a big neon sign that just says do not fight, right? So Apophis is not interested in that guy. So yeah, we go for that. You can see the Skeleton Archers are getting a little cheeky now. So they are turning around to fight the Brock Riders themselves. Mortibris moves just within 12 inches of them for the Surge, which is, you can see this nice rear charge lined up. It's a good one. The Mummies go back into Golic, mostly because, again, they're in the flank of the Bulwarkers, which is very unfortunate for them because it probably would have been better just to go for the double charge here. But, yep, you do what you do. I don't have anything that can block this up anymore. Well, I mean, Mortibris could, but that's a waste of points. So instead, I just leave it be. And here is the action shot. So in my shooting phase, I do 1 or 2 wounds to the Brock Riders, and then I get this surge off. But I end up clipping the woods, so 60 attacks turns into 30. So it's just, I was running low on clock. Getting 60 attacks would have taken too long. So 30 is exactly what I wanted. Here is the action shot, as I said before. You can see Apophis did manage to kill off this little Flame Priest, so that's great. Turns around. And then the Bone Giant manages to kill off the second organ gun. Look at his face. Look how happy this guy is. It looks like I haven't done the life leech yet, but I'm sure I will. And yeah, here is the end of turn shot, and it's not great. So you can see the Mummies went back into the the Ironclad. I do a few more wounds. I get another waiver on them, so that's pretty cool. But then I take these mummies, I go into Gallic, and I get him up to, looks like 6 wounds. Not enough. This is when we realize that Gallic could be box cards, so I roll it, it doesn't work. And then I get these Bulwarkers. I actually get them up to 13 wounds. So 13 wounds plus I have Dread right here. So effectively 14 wounds. All I'm looking for is a 9, you know. Just a quick 9 would be great. A quick 9 twice. So on the first one, I do roll it. I roll, I think, a 10. But then on the reroll, I fail it. So looks like my Enslaved Guardians are going to get flank charged by Brock Riders. But those Brock Riders are not going to be Thunderous 1 because I stripped it off. Yeah, way to go, Skeleton Archers. And here is Dwarf turn 5. So Dwarf turn 5. Unsurprisingly, the Brock Riders decide why would we charge the Skeleton Archers for the second time in the game and go into the flank of my Enslaved Guardians. Seems like the right call. Gallic goes into my mummies. Finally, these Ironclad pass their Headstrong, go into these mummies. And yeah, the Berserker Lord goes for a 3rd chance at Apophis. Listen, Apophis is already sitting on 5 wounds. I got him this time. So unfortunately, this is the end turn shot for the Dwarves, as again, this was a late game. With my opponent shooting, they get the Bone Giant back up to up to 10 wounds this time from Hernius, but again, do not manage to kill it. And the Berserker Lord actually lives up to their name this time, doing 5 wounds to Apophis, but again, not rolling that 11 plus to kill him. Although I think my opponent might have rolled it once, and on the reroll I didn't die. But yeah, these checks are pretty high this game. Yeah, and then let's see if I can end it. Yeah, end a turn shot. You can see both the mummies and the Enslaved Guardians are gone. And this is when, at the beginning of, so yeah, and then these mummies take 4 wounds here. So not the best. Gallic and the Bulwarkers just turn to face Apophis and the Giant. Now that the only thing left is that Berserker Lord standing in their way. While the, what are these? The Brock Riders overrun to pick up this loot token, or maybe they landed on it, picked it up then. So yeah, no, they overran onto it because the Enslaved Guardians were holding it, because I think they were, no, the Enslaved Guardians were not. So yeah, they overrun and grab it that way. And the these Skeleton Archers are like, we'll get you someday. So moving on to turn 6. It's pretty simple. Things are starting to wind down. We get the mummies into the front of these Ironclad again. This is when I remember they have regen, and I fail all my regen rolls. But I did, for fun, roll the regen rolls for the mummy unit right here, back when they had 9 wounds. And I passed 6 of them, so I would have been on 2 wounds total after my life leech, and Gallic did nowhere near enough damage to kill them off. So, you know, guys, just remember you have regen. It's easy. So yeah, I forgot about it. Cost me that unit. But the Skeleton Archers are like, listen, you don't need regen. You've got Skeleton Archers. So they move forward, ready for a second rear charge onto the Brock Riders. They fire their bows, doing nothing because, you know, that's, you do what you do. The Bone Giant goes into the Berserker Lord right there, hoping to kill them off and overrun into the, what are these, the Bulwarkers? You know, that's pretty unlikely. I've only got d6 plus 6 attacks, and he's a dash 17. I mean, I do have Dread, so Dread and Brutal, so knocking that down to a dash 15, it's doable, but not particularly likely. Apophis, again, goes, I will never charge you. Never, never, never. So instead charges into the Bulwarkers, who are sitting on 12 wounds right now due to Iron Resolve, hoping to kill them off. I've got 12 attacks, right? So 12 attacks on 4s, and then I wound on 3s. So, yeah, I get like, I don't know, 5-ish wounds, 4-ish wounds, 5-4, putting them on like a 16, 17, then I've got Dread, so it's more like a 17, 18, right? So, you know, getting to that 5 spot is pretty important because it makes it so you only need not double ones to waver and then a 5 to kill. Granted, less important against Dwarves as they have Headstrong, but still, it's a good spot to be in, and I think that's a good charge. Mortibrus moves forward, throwing caution to the wind, goes like, those skeleton archers right there, they've got this. So I think Apophis will be able to kill off the bulwarkers. I want to make sure that these Brock Riders cannot charge my mummies over here, because I've got a loot. I only have the loot token here on the mummies. I need to protect that. So Mortibrus steps up, gets in there, edging a little bit so I can see these skeletons, but still. That's the plan. With my shooting, you can see I do manage to get the skeleton archers into the rear of them. Pretty funny. I did a couple wounds with my bows. It looks like they're at 6 now, and I think they were at 3 before. Yeah, so I did 3 wounds with the bows. Pretty good. And here's the end of turn shot. So starting on the left, you can see the mummies managed to finally kill off those ironclad. So that's great. They just about face to make it so, I don't know, if there's a turn 7, they can maybe drop their loot token, the only thing that's causing me to not lose, and surge. But the skeleton archers managed to kill off the Brock Riders with a rear charge. That's real funny. They do basically nothing. I think Brock Riders are a -22. They're just barely within. So when we roll it, my opponent's, so I think I got him up to 12 wounds. I did 6. Then, and I roll it, and my opponent's like, well, you need a 10. I roll it the first time, and I roll a 10 or an 11, I want to say. And he's like, well, I've got to reroll, so I reroll it, and I roll a 9, and I'm like, ooh, I have Dread. Is Dread within range? And Dread is just barely within range because I hadn't rolled Apophis yet. So after rolling that, I get that 9, I kill them off, and I felt so good. Skeleton archers killing off a horde of Brock Riders, and they did every point of damage to them, and they did it in combat. I love it. 10 out of 10. Would bring again. I mean, they're not a great unit. I don't think a horde of these guys is great, but you know, they can get stuff done. They're not terrible. They're fine. Apophis, on the other hand, he fails pretty spectacularly. I think I don't do any wounds to the. I think Apophis does literally 0 wounds to these guys. So yeah, you know, Apophis do what Apophis do. I take my my bone giant, I charge into the Berserker Lord here. I do like a couple wounds, not enough to kill it off. But yeah, we end up, I think that's, oh, not the last picture. Yeah, Apophis did 0 wounds. Way to go, bud. You're a real champ. Jeez, Apophis. And yeah, I think that this is the final picture of the game. We don't even roll what happens in these combats because I kind of wanted to go home. My giant's on 10 wounds already. Oh no, we did roll that one. So yeah, we've got a Gallic, I think actually in the flank of Apophis. Yeah, in the flank of Apophis. And then we've got the Bulwarkers. We don't even move them. They easily kill off Apophis, who is still on 10 wounds because the fool forgot to, you know, hit or wound the Bulwarkers. So he dies off, and then we roll the Berserker Lord. They do a couple wounds. I didn't even mark it on the giant. I think he did quite a few, but, you know, 8 attacks on 3s and 2s will do that with Vicious. Or no, 3s and 2s with Vicious because he's got the Blade of the Beast Slayer. So kills off the Bone Giant finally, and we roll to see if there's a turn 7, and there is not. So thankfully for I'm thankful for that, because Gallic at the end of all this would have been right about here, probably facing like this, with the Bulwarkers right about here, right? So my skeleton archers have a token and my mummies have a token. The mummies can back up and hide, right? But these skeleton archers, I can only block one of these 2 units from charging me. I probably block the Bulwarkers with Mortibrus, throwing him under the bus. So I throw Mortibrus under the bus, block the Bulwarkers. My skeleton archers get charged by Gallic and by the Berserker Brock Lord, because I think the die is missing. I know the giant did a couple wounds there, but yeah, so I mean, they've got 12 wounds. You know, I could go for this weird charge with the skeleton. I probably wouldn't charge, I would just shoot because they're better at that. So I could go for a weird thing where I shoot into the Bulwarkers hoping to kill them off, and I block Gallic instead, but it's pretty hard to block a chariot base Granted, he's not nimble, but still hard against this this horde. So I'm not sure I can manage it. So yeah, this is the end of the game. That doesn't end up coming to pass, so it ends up being, I have a loot token on the skeleton archers, I got a loot token on the mummies. So it is a 2-0 victory. We add up the victory points, and my opponent has about 300 more kill points than I do, which makes sense given Apophis's appalling rolls. So getting 0 wounds there is real bad. Not getting the bulwarkers, not killing off the bulwarkers, and then dying because of it. Yeah, it's a big point swing. So I think that ends up being like a 14-6 in a 20 nail scale or an attrition scale, and in blackjack it's, you know, it's a solid win, an okay win, because I've got 2 more points, but I don't have 3 more. So yeah, that's the end of the game. I hope you guys liked it, and you know what, I'm glad that we got this rematch, because the first one was real nail biting, and it's really unfortunate I didn't get to show you guys, but this one was also a really fun game, and you know, a lot of mistakes as the time goes on, but I just think it makes it more interesting. So I hope you guys agree, and until next time, bye.